Welcome to VCC-TV. This is Priya Singh. In a major hurdle that the state and the centre government did cross yesterday, a panel headed by Finance Minister Arun Jaitley finalised the rates on goods for the implementation of the Goods and Services Tax that is slated to be rolled out from April 2017. Having said that, there still remain a lot of grey areas that need to be ironed out. To talk about same, I have Aman Malik with me.
Hi Priya.
Hi Aman. So Aman, first things first, I would like to know what are the things that will not be taxed?
See, we know for a fact that food grains will not be taxed. So your atta, dal, chawal, which are basic necessities, will not be taxed. We also know, because the government has said this, has said as much, that half the commodities in what constitutes the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which actually determines retail inflation, half the commodities will not be taxed. But there's the catch. We don't know which of the commodities, because they've not really come out with commodity classifications on those. We don't therefore know exactly which of the commodities will be taxed. How many of those commodities will be food commodities and how many of those commodities will be non-food commodities? Because the CPI basket in India, apart from food commodities, also has things like bedding, shoes, clothing. These are basically things that any person needs for basic survival. So we're not clear on that, but yes, wheat, rice and such food items will not be taxed for sure.
Right. Aman, going forward, there are 4 different tax slabs. There's
right.
5%, 12%, 18% and 28% and
That's
higher.
Right. Yes.
Now, how are we deciding what items will be taxed at what tax slabs?
Okay, so like I said, actually there are 5 tax slabs, to be honest. One is a zero, that's also a tax. Zero tax is also it's a tax slab per se. So there's 0%, 5%, 12, 18 and 28%. Like I just mentioned, very basic commodities will not be taxed. Then there'll be commodities which are a little just above the basic. For instance, things like other clothing items apart from basic clothes, some upholstery items and things like those. They will be taxed at 5%. Okay. Then a bulk of the items will be taxed at 2 rates of 12% or 18%. These actually include a majority of the things. So that will actually mean everything from mobile phones to toothpaste to what have you. So-called demerit goods. In economics, there's a concept of demerit goods, which is basically goods that you don't need. They are sin goods. So goods like tobacco, pan masala, luxury cars, etc. They will be taxed at 28%. That is the highest tax bracket. But there is a grey area. Whereas we know what tobacco is and we know what pan masala is, they have not really defined what a luxury car is. So automakers will now have to actually wait for a while and maybe lobby a little bit to either get their vehicle to get their vehicles out of that segment, because if their vehicles get taxed at 28%, they will have a problem because their costs will go up. There's also one more thing that we need to mention here. Items like pan masala and tobacco, over and above the 28% tax, there will also be a cess. That cess will be collected by the centre, and that cess, the proceeds from that, will be used to meet the revenue shortfall that producer states that produce more goods than consuming, will face once the GST is implemented. One last thing I have to mention, in the highest tax slab will also be white goods like washing machines, televisions, refrigerators, which is actually a good thing because right now they're taxed at about 30 to 31%, so it'll actually become cheaper.
Right. I would also like to know, will there be any revenue compensation to the states?
Yes, there will be. There is a 5-year period. Some of the states in India produce more and some states consume more. So the larger states, typically like Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, which are agricultural states, Madhya Pradesh, etc., they produce more. Smaller states, hill states and other smaller northeastern states, etc., they consume more. GST is a consumption tax. So it will favor states that consume more than they produce, okay, because the tax will be paid at the point of consumption. So naturally, producer states will lose out on revenue, which is why a revenue compensation mechanism has been worked out. Like we mentioned, the proceeds from the cess on sinful goods like tobacco, etc., will be collected by the centre. The first year's collection is likely to be around 50,000 crores. that money will be disbursed on a prorated basis to those states that are losing out on their revenue. There's a sunset clause, however. This will not continue forever. The first, this will first be done for a 5-year period. After which, if there are still some states which have not really upped their revenue and are losing revenue vis-a-vis other states, they will continue to get some compensation. However, there is one small catch which we need to mention here. They have said 50,000 crores will be collected. Now, there is no guarantee that the states will require less than, or 50,000 crores. They could even require less than that. Let's assume they only require 25,000 crores. What happens to the 25,000 crores? That the center gets to keep. Which is why some analysts are saying that this could be a backdoor mechanism by which the center is levying just an extra tax on the customer and burdening the customer.
Well, that's really interesting. Imam, one last question. Will gold be taxed?
That's an interesting question that we'll probably have a decision on by today evening. The government had initially said, the central government had, said initially that gold should be taxed at 4%. Now, there's a interesting thing that we need to mention here. When we talk about gold here, we talk about gold as bullion. So we are talking about gold as gold bars. Gold as jewelry will probably, because that's a finished product, will probably be taxed at between 12 to 18%. Okay, either 12 or 18%. But gold as bars, the government initially said should be taxed at 4%. But now your lowest tax rate is actually 5%. So will they tax gold at 5% or will they create a new slab for it? That most likely we should have some clarity on by today.
Thank you so much, Aman, for all the clarity that you gave us on GST. And for more news and updates on the same, please log on to www.vzcircle.com.